people are sick of the status quo. Even if they don't know that tyranny is the problem and freedom is the solution, they intuitively understand something is inherently wrong with the way things are being done, and this is our moment to seize that opportunity to show them that liberty is the way out of this.
What up, Vigilantes? I'm here with Spike Cohen. Spike was the VP candidate for the Libertarian Party alongside Joe Jorgensen. How are you, Spike?
I'm doing well, Raph. Thanks for having me on, man.
It's so good to see you again, and I want to ask you questions regarding the Liberty Movement as it stands right now.
Sure.
Post-COVID, post-pandemic. Where do you see it? I had a very interesting encounter with some individuals yesterday here, and they were talking to me about how they've never lived they were born in 2000, 2002, and these young people never knew what it was like to live in a pre-9/11 world. So what are we dealing here? What is this liberty movement? All these young people, where is their mind? And how is it different than maybe when you and I were part of the liberty movement, we were their age?
Well, I think the biggest difference is that we have this next layer of tyranny, right? So we see this. Government either creates or allows a crisis to become bad. They use that as an excuse to add the next layer of tyranny. When that fails to to make the crisis better, sometimes actually exacerbates the crisis and makes it worse, they use that as an excuse for even more tyranny. And so like 9/11, perfect example of that. Out of 9/11, we get the Patriot Act, we get the endless war on terror, we get all the things that came from that. Well, that didn't solve anything, and it's actually created many more problems. Well, now the newest thing is COVID. And after COVID, we now have the COVID regime, which really is now going to be used as a regime for everything. The structure for lockdowns and mandates and really that entire control regime that they've created, they're going to use that for other things in the future, not just other diseases, but there's been talk of using lockdowns for climate change, for example. And there's a few different things like that. So I think the difference now is we're just that much further along the road to tyranny, and we have that much further to travel back to get back to freedom. But the good thing that I see here at Yale, and that I'm seeing across the country, especially with young people, but really with everyone, is people are sick of the status quo. Even if they don't know that tyranny is the problem and freedom is the solution, they intuitively understand something is inherently wrong with the way things are being done, and this is our moment to seize that opportunity to show them that liberty is the way out of this.
So is the path politics? Because I know you've been involved in politics. Is that the path forward, or activism?
I don't think you have to choose between those. So for example, I actually recently launched an organization called You Are the Power, and we do issues-based activism. Now there's obviously a political bent to that because we're lobbying to city councils, I like to call it cyberbullying, but we're online swarming local governments on issues that matter to the people in their community. So there is a political component to it, but it is activism. I also think that there's a free market and agorism aspect to what can be done. I don't think we should be leaving any chips on the table when it comes to what we can do to try to push liberty. I think there is an electoral component. I think that there is an activism component. I think there's a market component to it. I think there's a messaging and I guess for lack of a better word, marketing component to it. I think there are many different ways that we can all be contributing in the ways that we're best at to be able to help push the movement for liberty.
And so where can you find out more about what you're doing with this online activism?
Sure. So my website is youarethepower.net. We actually do a combination of online and in-person activism. So when we find out about a hot button issue in a local community where the people there are outraged at their local government, they know they're doing the wrong thing, the solution to that is explicitly a libertarian solution. They just don't know how to effectively organize to get that implemented. We start with online activism, but we immediately move into in-person events and actually organizing for people to show up, talk to the city council members, and pretty much on a full court press. We hit them on social media, we hit them on their phone lines, we hit them on email, we hit them in their council meetings until eventually they bend and just do what we want them to.
So what does cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, what role does it play within this activism and or political initiatives?
Well, I think that DeFi and cryptocurrency and Bitcoin and that entire space is the way out of this. You know, there's the old cliche, Bitcoin fixes this. Well, it does. If you think at the reason that government is able to do everything that they do, the reason they're able to do this tyranny, the reason they're able to do these endless wars overseas, the reason they're able to cage millions of innocent people, the reason they can do this is because they control the monetary supply. They control what money is. They can print out trillions of dollars and then use them however they wish to do it and stick the rest of us with the bill for it. It is the fact that they actually control the system of banking that they force on all of us that allows them to do all of this. If they were subject to a market-based monetary system the way that the rest of us would be, then they couldn't do this. They'd have to actually prove to us that the things they're doing are a good idea and get our money as a result of it. They couldn't just make us do it. So, Bitcoin and really the entire space of crypto fixes that core problem, the head of the serpent that is the Federal Reserve and the worldwide central banking system at its root. That is the core problem.
So what are your goals now after running for VP for the Libertarian Party? What are your goals? What are you focusing on right now?
My focus is on building a culture of liberty. Now, the way I'm doing it is through this issues-based activism. But frankly, there are so many other ways that it can be done too. And I think our focus should be on bringing people into the liberty movement. It's an easy metric to say, oh, this person has joined the Libertarian Party or this person has voted Libertarian. But I think a much longer term and holistic way to fix this is to bring people into the idea behind liberty, non-aggression, the idea of voluntary interaction, anti-authoritarianism. Because when you build a culture of liberty, then the politics will work itself out. If the vast majority of people, or even a large minority of people, demand to be free, there is no tyranny that can exist in any real way inside in that kind of a society. So the more that we can bring people into liberty, the more everything else ends up working itself out on every front.
So in Latin America right now, there's a phenomenon with a man by the name of Agustin Laje out of Argentina, and he wrote a book that was published recently called The Cultural Battle. And what does a libertarian culture look like?
A libertarian culture looks like a culture in which people intuitively understand that each one of us has autonomy over ourselves. We own ourselves, we own our bodies, we own our property, we have rights to be able to speak and think as we wish, and to have a mutual respect for that. Even if I don't like what you're saying or what you're doing with your property or what you're doing with your body, if I respect it to the extent that it doesn't infringe on me, and vice versa, you respect my autonomy and tolerate what I do to the extent that it doesn't infringe on you, then that's a society that's able to function much better because it naturally rejects coercion, but it also, we can come up with voluntary ways to work on the problems that we have. So a society, a culture of liberty is a culture in which people intuitively recognize each other and have respect for each other as individual humans who have autonomy and self-ownership.
What role does nationalism have within this cultural battle?
So if you do nationalism versus globalism, nationalism kind of is a decentralization from the idea of globalism, of a one world coercion. But nationalism has its limits as well. Nationalism is now, multiple units of coercion, but still systems of centralized coercion. So while I would, if I'm talking with a nationalist who wants to stop one world government, well, I agree with them on that. But to the extent that they then want to impose the same kind of controls that one world government would impose, but just at their national level, then I wouldn't agree with them on that. Within the United States, I'd like to see us as 300 million Liechtensteins. 300 million people, or 330 million, how many people are here, who have as much individual decentralized autonomy over themselves as possible. And so to whatever extent a nationalist agrees with me on rolling back some of the controls that multinational governments want to impose, or even national governments want to impose, then we're allies on that. But on the greater scheme of things, I don't want a strong central government. I want individuals with decentralized power.
What is the greatest threat to freedom right now?
Fear.
How so?
The biggest threat to freedom is people who are fearful and who do not understand. I guess I should say fear, but also fear and ignorance. So the fear of the unknown, or the fear of the known, combined with ignorance of how we got here and how tyranny and oppression creates problems or makes them worse, and how freedom actually can keep those things from happening, or at least ameliorate the effects of them.
So fear leads people to turn to authority.
Very often.
So how do you veer them away from authority towards freedom and self-ownership?
Well, I think there are many ways to do it. The way that I have been doing that is the reason we're focusing on local issue-based activism is we can show specific examples that people already intuitively understand that the problem is people in power doing the wrong thing. And when we consistently show that the people that you, in your moment of fear, turn to save you are the ones that you consistently recognize are the people you trust the least. You know, approval ratings for politicians, for Congress, for presidents, at best it'll be 30, 40, 50%. Usually it's in the teens or 20s. We all recognize that politicians and bureaucrats and cronies are the people we trust the least. But when we're fearful, we often turn to them because they say that they'll fix it. If we can consistently show people that these are not the people we should trust, that we should trust ourselves and those that we actually voluntarily work with, we can break that sort of addiction to allaying our fear onto someone that has total control.
So libertarians have always talked about how the enemy of freedom is government, centralized government, also central banks.
Yeah.
What about big tech? What role does big tech now have in tyranny?
The enemy of freedom is centralized coercion. Now, usually that is directly through government. It is often through the client of government now. In fact, that's what fascism is. Fascism is the marriage of the state and corporations. And what we're seeing with the censorship from big tech, we now know, it's for a long time it was assumed or implied that government was guiding it. Well, we now know explicitly that the government is often telling big tech, and not just our government, many governments across the country are telling big tech what can and cannot be allowed on their platform. And of course, big tech is perfectly happy doing it because in exchange for them doing the will of the state, they get the protections, they get the tax breaks, they get the cornered markets, they get the regulations that destroy their smaller competitors, they get government actions against smaller competitors that put them out of business. So yeah, in exchange, they do the bidding of the state, and they get their protected market as a result of it. To that extent, to whatever extent someone is doing the bidding of the state for political purposes, they themselves are operating as a functionary of the state, and it just demonstrates how centralized coercion is the enemy of freedom.
How do we stop that? I
think honestly the best way to stop that from the big tech front is through decentralized social media. And I think we're already beginning to see the beginning of blockchain-based social media. I think it's DAOs, DAOs. I think you're going to see more and more of that. The more you can decentralize the access to information, the harder it is to suppress it or even to figure out how to suppress it. And it also gives us immediate control over our information and our privacy and everything that comes from that.
Are you hopeful for the future?
I am. I always am. I am a hopeful, I guess, eternal optimist. If you look, even with all the problems that we have right now, you're going to be hard-pressed to find someone that says, I would rather live 200 years ago, or 500 years ago, or 1,000 years ago, or whatever. And not just because of technological changes. That's a big part of it. The market has provided some incredible technology and changes that have made our lives, improved our lives, both our standard of living and our longevity in tremendous and profound ways. But in many different aspects, things are better for the vast majority of people and continue to get better. Despite the tyranny, despite the control, every few decades, people can typically look back and say, actually, yeah, things have largely gotten better. Now, we have a long way to go, and there's a lot of bad things that have happened as well. But no, I am optimistic, and the more we can get access to information, every major revolution that has happened in humanity that has resulted in humanity having more control and of themselves and having more autonomy and freedom has always coincided with a change in technology that allowed for greater spread of information. The printing press, newsprint, radio, TV, the internet, social media. I think and those cycles get tighter and tighter and smaller as the spread of that technology gets, the hockey stick of that, the bell curve of that technology continues to go up and up. I think that we are very close to having such immediate access to information that it becomes effectively impossible for them to be able to keep us from knowing what we need to know. So no, I remain optimistic.
Do you see the alt-right and neo-reaction as an enemy to freedom?
I'm largely on the scale of it, yeah. But I would also see the progressive movement as that as well. And are there things that the alt-right may agree with the liberty movement on? Sure, but there are also things that progressives may agree on. I think that to whatever extent a movement, or even an individual, if you take it down to the individual level, to whatever extent a person believes in centralized coercion and control over individual freedom, to that extent they are an enemy of freedom. So I would say overall, the far right and the far left are enemies of freedom in terms of their actual ideology. But I think that the average person who may consider themselves far right or far left, there's probably quite a bit that they actually agree with us on. They're just not being consistent about it.
How can we keep governments and tyrants from using cryptocurrency and blockchain technology as authoritarian tools?
I think the more that we engage through actually using the network and developing it, and developing new improvements to that network and new networks, the more that we can do that, the more we can stay ahead of them. And that's true of anything. The more that you can stay ahead of the state in any sphere or space or technology, the more that you're able to keep ahead of them and keep them from taking it over. The good news is government usually sucks at doing things. Like government is a bad way for humans to organize. That's why they're so bloated and inefficient and harmful and abusive, is because by their very nature, it's not the individuals in government that are the problem, it's the actual structure of government itself that leads to those bad outcomes. The silver lining of that is usually the market could stay one step ahead of them.
Awesome. So in the cryptocurrency world, we see an emphasis on extreme capitalism that uses honest, transparent, and open blockchains. And we also see an emphasis on extreme privacy, where we use private by default protocols. What is your personal flavor of crypto? What is your favorite line of crypto? Do you prefer privacy, or do you prefer extreme capitalism that is open and transparent?
Well, I will admit, I'm not so much of an expert that I wouldn't think that those two things can't coexist. So for example, something like Monero.
I agree.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think something like Monero, for example, I would say probably fits the bill for both of those. When it comes to what are my favorite cryptos, I tend to not get involved in what I have or don't have, for no other reason that I don't want to be seen as giving financial advice, which this is not financial advice. But I will say this. I think that there is a strong argument to be made. I'm not necessarily a Bitcoin maximalist, but I will say that there is an argument to be made that because Bitcoin is the foundation of all of this, that it is likely that Bitcoin will remain the prime cryptocurrency at least for quite some time. Maybe that will change in the future, but I do anticipate that just because of being the first in the market for quite some time, that will probably be the case. But yeah, I mean, if you look at something like Monero, for example, I think it does both the extreme capitalism, as you put it, as well as the privacy aspect.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're bullish
on crypto?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah. No, listen. This is not financial advice. I just like the coin. But I will say this. I think that it is. I love watching every time cryptocurrency has this parabolic rise to the point where even the most casual normie celebrities talking about it, and it goes from here to here, and then it crashes all the way to here, and everyone goes, "Oh, crypto's dead. Yeah. Cryptocurrency's dead. I knew it. I totally knew it. That's why I just lost my shirt, because I totally knew it." And then it stays here for a while, and then it goes way up even higher than I can put my arm. And then it crashes to here, and people go, "Oh, it's dead, I knew it." I mean, the pattern is obvious. I'm very bullish on crypto. I think that it is the DeFi and cryptocurrency is agorism. It is a perfect example of a gray market technology that is becoming white market because the government and banking system has realized they can't just completely displace it. Now they're trying to co-opt it, which means it's too late. Now they can't try to, "Oh, well, actually, it's terrible." You've been creating frickin' hedge funds around Bitcoin. You can't pretend that it's not okay now, right? So even though it's not good that they've gotten involved in regulating, it's good to the extent that they've now mainstreamed it. And I think we're very close to a situation wherein there is no argument for fiat currency derived from government other than "we'll kill you or imprison you if you don't use it." And when that moment happens, then effectively we will all be in the gray market. And I think that DeFi at that point will have just completely supplanted fiat and centralized currency.
Do you have any opinions on centralized digital currencies, central bank digital currencies, CBDCs?
About shitcoins? Yeah, no, I think they're
the
terrible.
ones that the government wants to create
Yes.
out of the Fed.
Yeah, shitcoins. Yes.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
real shitcoins.
Like actual shitcoins.
Actual
made
shitcoins.
from real shit. No, I think that I think that that's an attempt to try to co-opt and replace, right?
Right.
So they're like, okay, well actually crypto, we've been saying it's nothing but drug dealers and drug cartels and terrorists, but actually it's a good technology, but really we should be the ones in charge of it. So it's like saying, hey, if you like Bitcoin, here's like the worst version of crypto ever. Like if you like this thing that actually can act as a store of value and has built-in scarcity, here's this other thing that has none of that, but also you don't have to carry cash around. So when they are doing that, when we're seeing more and more talk about the co-opt and replace, they're just making the argument for crypto, but then they're offering their own version that sucks. So I think it's just I would say we can look back 50, maybe 100 years from now and see this as the final death throes of the central banking system, that they tried to we'll make our own version. And I think that before it truly dies, if it ever does, it will first be a thing where people just impose it on people and threaten them if they don't use it. And by then the argument will already be lost because they've already been spending decades saying crypto is the best way forward anyway.
Do you incorporate cryptocurrency in your localist activism?
No comment.
Okay, awesome. And so where can we find more about you? Where could people look into what you're doing and join your movement?
Sure. So the organization I've started is You Are the Power. Like I said, we are liberating communities one issue at a time in local communities across the country. If you'd like to be a part of it, youarethepower.net. And we have fun. We cyberbully the government, then we show up and bully them in real life too.
Nice.
And it is an incredible and empowering feeling when you can show people that, all they thought they could do was vote every 2 years. When they realize they can organize with other people, show up, intimidate their local city council, school board, whatever, into doing what they wanted them to do, and then if they don't, they'll just run against them and replace them. It's an incredibly empowering feeling to watch these people realize just how much power they have. And in doing that, we bring them into the liberty movement, show them that not only do they have that power, but that if we are consistently applying libertarian ideals to that power, then we can live in truly free and prosperous communities. That's the real special thing, and that's what we're doing. So youarethepower.net.
And what would be the last takeaway as a piece of advice for everyone watching that are dealing with their still relative status, family, friends?
Oh, just remember you were once like that too. When you're talking with people and they say the absolute dumbest thing and what about the roads but who's going to keep us safe? Just remember that you probably weren't as libertarian at one point as you are now. And just remember how you thought and where that process came from. And just show a little empathy when you talk to people. Because most people aren't your oppressors. They're just they don't know any better. So just remember that.
Thank you so much for your
Absolutely,
time.
Man. Thank you.
Spike, thank you so much. Peace, love, anarchy, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome. That was great.